Hi, everybody. Sorry for the slightly late start here. We were getting our act together. So please join me in welcoming back the Wonder Triplets. You guys know Rain Waters from the Afterburn podcast, F-16 driver extraordinaire, and my longtime good friend and frequent contestant on the channel, Sal Mercogliano, of course, the host of What's Going On with Shipping. Gentlemen, how are you?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
Good. Mooch, a little busy, but besides that, we're all good.
Yeah, we're busy, right? Like we used to say back in the day, war is our business, and business has been good. And I don't mean that in a perverse, profiteering way. It's been busy. And as we said a few weeks ago, this dynamic situation will demand live streams. And so that's why we're doing this format. That's not something I do on a regular basis. But I think because this is such a dynamic situation, we got to have, as soon as we finish, it goes live, no post-production required. So please give me some grace in terms of the one-arm paper hanger here. We're going to try to get some comments teed up. I'm working the assets as we're talking. So, here we go. I'm also monitoring the news as we're talking here to make sure nothing pops up. So, guys, first item to discuss here is a dubious one, which is the Pentagon has announced the 5th and 6th casualty from that drone attack a few days ago in Kuwait. Major Jeffrey O'Brien, age 45, of Waukee, Iowa, and Chief Warrant Officer 3, Robert Marzan, 54 years old, of Sacramento, California. And I revealed the names of the other 4 in yesterday's episode. So please keep the families of the fallen in your thoughts and prayers. And let's never forget that this war is affecting service members and the nation in ways that we need to think about first and foremost at all times. Meanwhile, last night, the Senate had a vote on the War Powers Resolution. Basically, this vote, which required a majority to pass, would have demanded that the president remove all troops until Congress approves the war. And it came down along party lines with 2 folks switching sides. Rand Paul voted yay, meaning he wanted the resolution to pass. He wanted the president to justify the war to Congress and Congress to approve the war. Remember, Rand Paul is a Republican. And John Fetterman, wearing his best hoodie. I wonder, is he sponsored by Carhartt? I hope so, because he wears this stuff like all the time. But he wore the hoodie to the vote, and he voted nay, which was the way that all the Democrats voted. So basically, it came down 47-53. So there is no congressional limit on the president's ability to conduct the war. And generally, when there are troops already downrange, it is bad form to kneecap the commander-in-chief. This has been the case in previous administrations. So those are the 2 breaking news items before we get into some of the details here. So first item to talk about, and we have a lot to talk about, is yesterday CENTCOM released B-roll of a submarine taking out an Iranian Navy frigate. Some have said corvette, but it's actually a frigate. So this is pretty remarkable footage. This, what you're seeing, is the video through the periscope. So obviously periscope depth. And you can see the munition torpedo hits right at the stern, just rear third of the vessel. This was the Iranian Navy frigate Dana. It was struck 40 nautical miles south of Sri Lanka. Here's a map to orient you with where Sri Lanka is. It's there on the southern tip of India. So if you look at where Iran is, where the North Arabian Sea is, the Gulf, where the war is going on, and where this ship was, it's sort of out of the general area of the war zone, let's say. This ship was returning from an exercise with the Indian Navy. We don't know exactly what submarine fired the torpedo, but if you do the percentages, it was most likely a Virginia-class submarine, attack submarine, which is the newest of the Navy attack submarines. And it has been confirmed by CENTCOM that that submarine used a Mark 48 torpedo. Here's the tail of the tape of the Mark 48. I won't read you the slide. Of interest is the dual guidance, uses a wire connection for real-time operator control after launch, and also has its own active/passive sonar that'll take over if that wire is severed. The other intel we have is find fix was done by a U.S. Navy P-8 Poseidon anti-submarine warfare aircraft. And there was a discussion over encrypted comms between the P-8 and the submarine on, do we want to use a harpoon, which is the weapon you see below the P-8 here, or a Mark 48? Obviously, they settled on a Mark 48. So, Sal, anything to add on that particular attack?
No, I would just add on the submarine attack. From what I'm hearing, it is a Virginia class that initiated that attack. We've seen submarine attacks during the Cold War, not by the United States, obviously. The one that strikes most is probably Conqueror during the Falklands War, sinking General Belgrano. They used 3 Mark 8s to do that attack. This was a Mark 48 ADCAP. It's interesting that they struck at the stern. That almost tells me they were either aiming for it, because if it's wire guided, they can literally direct it, or it lost its connection and went acoustic and hit the screws. There's obviously an issue about what that frigate or corvette was doing. What was it a potential viewed as a threat to the Lincoln battle group? Could have been a threat to Diego Garcia, but obviously the U.S. decided to take it out. It's interesting to note, I just saw that the Sri Lankans have basically taken the other vessel, the other Iranian vessel that's still in the area under its protection, actually put crew on board it, and I think they're bringing it into port. Everyone wants to comment about the U.S. taking that shot. I have a question about why the Iranians decided it was a good idea to take that Navy vessel out in international waters when they knew the U.S. was targeting literally the entire Iranian Navy. So again, this is by all accounts, without a declaration of war, a war between the U.S. and Iran, and they had to think taking a Navy vessel out into the Indian Ocean was going to get targeted almost immediately.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Speaking of Sri Lankans, I think they took the survivors. They did the rescue operation as well. I think there were like 80 some casualties, and then the balance of the crew was rescued by the Sri Lankan Navy or Coast Guard. Speaking of how did this damage the ship? You can see the lethality mechanism. That bullet says, unlike direct impact weapons, it creates a massive gas bubble under the vessel that breaks its back, causing it to split and sink. And so you can obviously see that here. When it explodes, it definitely breaks the keel. Not amidships, which would be, to Sal's point, a more effective way to do it, but definitely with good effect.
And that was what the old Mark 14 torpedoes were supposed to do in World War II that didn't do it, but yet the Mark 48s obviously are very effective at doing that. And Mark 48s have been tested, if you ever see the drills and sink X's and exercises like that, very effective in doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. Meanwhile, there was a brief yesterday, the second one since the war kicked off on Saturday at the Pentagon with Secretary Hegseth and Chairman Kane. The big takeaway here, Rain, was the chairman brief that we're switching from exquisite weapons, the standoff weapons, and I guess that means like, JASSM C1 and whatever the Air Force variants would be for the long-range standoff weapons, and switching to precision-guided munitions. So I think we consider JDAM in that category, and also good old-fashioned laser-guided munitions. So I don't know if this is a function of inventory, and I'll put up the president's post on that topic in a second here, but it's either because we're running out of exquisite weapons or we're in a red zone with the stockpiles, which has been kicked around before, or we've done the integrated air defense rollback and other target list takedowns to the degree that we don't need to use our exquisite weapons anymore. What are your thoughts there?
So we did hear the chairman say yesterday that we won't talk about stockpiles. There's been a lot of questions. I brought it up as well. And one aspect with that, if we look at just the Gulf states, there is a lot of U.S. military hardware through foreign military sales that is being utilized. I think the Emiratis, for one example, are the ones who have posted the most about the number of drones as well as ballistic missiles that they have taken out. They seem to be pretty frequent. To ballpark it, don't quote me on this, but I think they've had over 1,000 drones shot at them, hundreds of ballistic missiles that they've taken out. Where I go with that is obviously a lot of these countries are utilizing their U.S. hardware, depleting their stockpiles. So I think no matter what, we've used a lot of munitions across this conflict. You cannot just replace those overnight. Regardless, the chairman did say, hey, we're not going to talk about our stockpiles. That's a matter of national security. But I think as we pivot, I truly do believe from what we've seen, we saw a drone operating over Shiraz a few days ago. You're not going to put a drone operating inside Iran if you're worried about surface-to-air missiles or air-to-air threats. That's a big fat target. We've had B-1s do strikes inside Iran. Again, that thing could soak up a lot of missiles. If you have not rolled back the integrated air defense system, if you have not taken care of the air picture to a point where you're comfortable, you're not going to put those assets out there. So I think when we hear the chairman say we are now kind of transitioning, in my mind, what I view that as is to phase two, where we're moving from, as you've said, the long range standoff munitions like JASSM ER to now the precision guided gravity fall, 250-pound class to 2,000-pound class, GPS, laser guided weapons. I think we're now going to see those strike packages look more, and I use the term loosely, traditional of what we've seen over the last few years, more like a large force exercise strike package where you're going to have assets like the F-22 out there ensuring that air superiority is met, that the Iranians don't get a fighter off the ground, or if they do, it doesn't threaten the strike package. You're going to have those F-16, Block 50, and Block 52 wild weasels doing that suppression of enemy air defense mission. Because the chairman did say we have the southern flank with air superiority. But as we've seen, Iranians using scoot and shoot, or shoot and scoot tactics, they have mobile surface-to-air missile systems. So that might hail back towards something like what we saw in Yemen with mobile surface-to-air missile threats where they pop up, and you have to be able to have that real-time kinetic seed response to take out those surface-to-air missile systems to protect the strike package. So I think this is going to start looking more like what we have seen in the past, having flown some of these inside Syria in the early days of Operation Inherent Resolve. You would have the F-22 tasked with air superiority. You would have wild weasels doing escorts of B-1s, B-1s hitting, targets. So that is kind of how I view it. I can't imagine that we would put our airmen, our sailors, naval aviators in harm's way if we didn't think we could handle the air picture and the integrated, again, integrated air defense network to be able to go and conduct and use precision guided munitions. Clearly, we have more of those than we do of these standoff munitions.
So speaking of stockpiles, the president posted this response to the notion the United States munition stockpiles have at the medium and upper medium grade never been higher or better. As was stated to me today, we have virtually an unlimited supply. Wars can be fought, quote unquote, forever and very successfully just using these supplies, which are better than other countries' finest arms. At the highest end, we have a good supply, but are not where we want to be. Much additional high-grade weaponry is stored for us in outlying countries. Then come the jabs. Sleepy Joe Biden spent all of his time and our country's money giving everything to P.T. Barnum Zelensky of Ukraine. So we'll see later why that was probably an unnecessary characterization, because we're kind of reaching out to Ukraine for their drone technology. And while he gave so much of the super high-end away free, he didn't bother to replace it. Fortunately, I rebuilt the military in my first term and continue to do so. The United States is stocked and ready to win. Big, triple exclamation point. Thank you for your attention to this matter, Donald J. Trump. So just notable that we are shifting, and that may inform the target set and the mission, the ATO going forward here, along the lines of what Rain is saying. Meanwhile, the other issue that the chairman brought up was one of our priorities targeting wise is ballistic missiles. And as we'll show in a second, the Iranians are still very persistent with hitting all other Arab states and Israel and trying to draw other nations into the war. That is their strategy. So we're going after them. One of the things that makes that a bit problematic, and we'll show some B-roll of us actually hitting those, that the CENTCOM FLIR B-roll that they're putting out. So we are hitting their launchers and their storage facilities, but we also have revealed the fact that a lot of their launchers are underground. So you see here, it's sort of like the movie Dune, where the sandworms pop up, out of nowhere. And so it's hard to target these launchers because they exist underground. So just note that as we're talking about what it is we're going to do here. So the other brief is Admiral Cooper, who is he's the commander of CENTCOM, a Navy surface warfare officer, also noted he's a Naval Academy grad, class of '89. He was 5th Fleet before he was CENTCOM, so he's got the right kind of background for this particular conflict. But he gave a great, very concise brief on what the priorities are. We brought up a couple of things. First is, and let me advance the video here to the B-roll. First is, we used for the first time the precision strike missile. And so this is, I guess it's a HIMARS launcher, a TACMS launcher with that particular munition. We also are leveraging, ironically, Iranian Shahad drone technology to make them better. And he's established a task force called Scorpion Strike that has launched numerous one-way attack drones to strike targets. So again, it's sort of ironic that we're using the Shahed technology, improving it and sending it back at the Iranians. He mentioned that the target destruction, the number that you put out is basically the right one. Rain, 2,000 targets have been hit. I'll bring up the target set that we always put up at this moment. So again, counter nuclear, yellow, counter military, red, counter regime, counter resources, black. Again, we keep going after the red ones because that's also where the missile launchers are. This is also what the chairman briefed as the first 100-hour timeline. And this is pretty much along the lines that we imagined it would be. You can see the infographic shows the targets, and then there's a timeline along the bottom of the high points along the way. So, T minus 00 at 0200 Eastern Standard Time on Saturday. We established air superiority along the coast by 06 on Sunday, the 1st of March, the next day. Israeli has air superiority. Israeli Air Force has air superiority to the north at 2300 Eastern on Sunday. Bomber pulses, B-1s, B-2s, B-52s. As Rain said, you're not going to put in B-1s and B-52s if you do not have high confidence that you've taken out the strategic SAMs. On the 2nd of March, no warships in the Arabian Gulf. That's one of Admiral Cooper's main prerogatives and priorities. So basically, let's call it praying mantis 2. The Iranian Navy is on the bottom, including the most recent one, the frigate taken out yesterday off the coast of Sri Lanka. And then what I just said, an SSN. So yes, it was in fact not an SSGN, because as Sal pointed out a couple of episodes ago, we do have the USS Georgia and SSGN in the region. So this was a fast attack submarine. We're guessing a Virginia class that took out that frigate / corvette, whichever it is. I'm thinking it's a frigate. So that's kind of the high points of what Admiral Cooper briefed. Sal, bring us up to date on the highlights of your latest episode. What is happening in the Strait of Hormuz?
You're seeing on the attacks along the coast there. We're seeing attacks on ships. In many ways, the Iranians are replicating what the Houthis did down on the Red Sea and when they attack ships. So they're using everything from unmanned aerial vehicles to unmanned surface vehicles. Matter of fact, we had a tanker hit this morning off the coast of Kuwait by an unmanned surface vessel. Fortunately, the tanker was empty, blew a nice big hole in the side of it. Looks like a kind of Wile E. Coyote kind of smashed right into the side of it. But that hit is really demonstrating the danger right now. What we've seen happen is from 28 February up until yesterday, traffic through the Strait of Hormuz has dropped off. There's literally almost no traffic going through except for a few ships that are taking the risk. And that's because of two reasons. One, it has to do with the threat perceived by the Iranians that they are threatening to hit vessels coming through. But the really big issue has to do with insurance. Commercial shipping is all about insurance. And what happened was, because of the perceived threat of damage to the ships, the shipping companies, which insure, they create these pools of insurance, basically had all the ships holed in and outside the Strait of Hormuz. They have since renegotiated and reissued insurance. There's a committee called the Joint War Committee that meets in London. It's made up of insurance brokers, and they set what's called the war risk insurance. And so they raised the price to go through the Strait of Hormuz from about 0.2%, the value of the shipping cargo, to 2%, which doesn't sound like a huge amount, but when you have $100 million ship, you're going from paying $200,000 to $2 million. And what is happening right now is the president yesterday put out a note saying that the U.S. will assume the kind of the war risk and provide escorts. Well, that's signing up for a lot that I don't think the U.S. wants to do. I don't think we want to get into the insurance business to insure 125 ships going through the Strait of Hormuz every day. It sounds like the insurance business itself is getting it back together again. The convoy issue is another interesting one, Ward, because convoying is a really difficult thing to do. You need a lot of assets to do that. And that would mean pulling assets away from strike capability. And I'm not sure the U.S. has that depth to do it. As far as I know, based on open source intelligence, there's about 8 Arleigh Burke class destroyers, 3 littoral combat ships in and around the 5th area AOR. That is nowhere near enough to provide the escorts needed, not just for the Strait of Hormuz, but up the 1,000-mile length of the Persian Gulf. And so I'm not sure how that is going to work out. I know that there are upper-level people looking at this. Are we talking about something akin to the end of the tanker war, Operation Enduring Operation Praying Mantis. And when we were doing the strikes against the Iranian Navy, we started escorting U.S. flagged and Kuwaiti reflagged tankers out. That could be a potential possibility. There are 5 U.S. flagged ships that are in the Persian Gulf right now, and there's other U.S. ships coming in. So if we do Earnest Will, that's the operation there. I just popped back in my head. Apologize. But if we try to repeat Earnest Will, are we going to be sending U.S. ships through? That's an interesting scenario. We just had a small container ship got hit by an unmanned aerial drone. That ship was abandoned. It's a very small vessel, but it's still significant. So we're waiting to see when the rubber band snaps. The problem you have in the Persian Gulf is this. There are enough ships in the Persian Gulf right now to go into port and load fuel and load gas and load everything. But when you run out of empty ships in the Persian Gulf, that's the problem, because then you're talking about shutting down facilities throughout the Gulf, and they don't want to do that. So what we're going to see is empty ships start running into the Persian Gulf here within the next few days, I'd predict. And they're going to go in and start loading to take oil and gas out. And then you're going to have to escort out these fully loaded ones. And eventually it's going to happen because the price for shipping right now is going through the roof. And there's going to be a point where money is going to take over versus safety for the ship and crew.
Roger that. Good gouge. Again, this is going to affect everyone watching right now because gas prices are going up already. As Sal mentioned, oil prices gone up, futures going down. And so this is affecting everybody locally, whether you know it or not. Check out how much your regular gas costs this week versus how much it cost last week.
They just had the highest charter rate ever for a ship sailing from the U.S. Gulf Coast to Asia. That has nothing to do with this at all, but that gives you an idea of how this is impacting the marketplace and ocean transportation around the world.
Roger that. Thanks for those details. So, Rain, yesterday I did an episode about the friendly fire shoot down of the 3 Strike Eagles, and it was revealed that a Kuwaiti Hornet was guilty of the shoot down. This is just a sort of stock image that I doctored to be representative of a Hornet, legacy Hornet shooting a Sidewinder. So we don't know for sure if it was just 3 winders. That was what the Wall Street Journal sources told them. Could have been an AMRAAM. The Kuwaitis do have AMRAAM. But there's this other theory, conspiracy theory, let's call it, that this Kuwaiti pilot knew what he was doing. What are your immediate thoughts around this entire circumstance?
I guess you can't rule out anything. I would like to just back up and paint the picture of this environment. And if everyone can place themselves, in the shoes of this pilot in Kuwait at the time, right? They essentially got quickly pulled into this as Kuwait and all the other Gulf states came under attack. And we know now that Kuwait, the first spot for U.S. service members to be killed in action. So I am just going to go out on a limb here and say that the stress across the board there was probably at an elevated level. What we don't know timeline specific wise, at least I haven't seen yet, is during this time frame, was Kuwait under attack? Was there an inbound warning? Because if we do have that going on at the time, that throws another wrinkle into this, meaning that their air defense network, they're running an integrated air and missile defense network. Everyone is. And you have lots of pieces that put this puzzle together. And if you start removing those puzzle pieces and removing links in the chain of communication, this is where the breakdown can start to occur. So we don't know that timeline, or again, at least I don't know that timeline. Were they under attack at this time? Did someone have a piece of information that was critical that could have been passed to the Kuwaiti F-18s that would have enhanced his situational awareness? You said it was a Legacy Hornet. Again, I hadn't seen confirmed a Legacy or a Super Hornet because they fly both. If this is a Super Hornet, do you know if it is confirmed?
I don't believe they possess Super Hornets yet. They've ordered 28 of them, but Congress has not approved that foreign military sale. So they have 27 Legacy C model Hornets.
That's good to know. Because obviously the Super Hornet, that changes the calculus. The situational awareness you have in a Super Hornet versus a Legacy Hornet, obviously quite different.
Yeah.
So when I hear this, right, one, to shoot 3 contacts in a Legacy 4th generation platform with a mech scan radar is impressive. And this had to happen in relatively rapid succession in a short time frame.
So I'm wondering, are they okay? So they're RTB, RTF. Where are the Strike Eagles? Are they in Jordan? Because that would make sense.
So that's my next piece, right? Were those Strike Eagles supposed to be there?
Okay.
Were they diverting in there? Did they have an emergency?
Like what, to Al Jaber? Diverting to Al Jaber?
Yeah, were they low on gas? And that's where I would assume they'd be going, is to Al Jaber. We have seen the open source with the Strike Eagles being in Jordan, but did they get, I don't know, did they get moved forward? Was this their planned base of return? Because again, if, the Kuwaitis, the Omanians, the Qataris, not everyone has the same information. Not everyone gets all the squawks and all the pieces. So you can see where this confusion might have been. And again, I'm going out on a limb here, and just another possible scenario is, were these Strike Eagles supposed to be coming back? Were they unexpected? Maybe, maybe not. So again, there's a lot of different scenarios here. And as you kind of opened up with, there's conspiracies going around that maybe this Hornet pilot knew what he was doing and he had the situational awareness. That obviously changes the calculus here drastically. But I also, want to present, like, this is the fog of war. There is chaos. Ask the questions. Were these guys, was this planned? Was it on the ATO? Did they take off and going back here? Did they take off from somewhere else? Have to divert here? Was their divert communicated effectively? All these things I think are in the realm of possible. Yeah,
for sure. And I'm not spring loaded to go to the guy was on a jihad.
It's a big leap and a big accusation that I don't say lightly.
Yeah, and I don't think you could sit on that for very long. If that was the case, as soon as the guy lands, they're gonna be all over him, right? Because you're not gonna tolerate that.
You're gonna know what information was available and what he had.
No, absolutely. I think we would already know. Because nobody's gonna sit on that. As we're looking for root cause. The other question I have for you, you just talked about potential divert, because obviously, if he's using a winder, he may or may not have had a radar lock on any of these guys. Is he going, like the Murder Hornet loadout with nothing but heaters, no AMRAM? And so are they coming back in a fingertip, or are they loose combat spread? Because if somebody blows up, or you see a tailpipe pipe go up and then guys start punching out, aren't you going to start evading, or, once hit, or again, these are the details that we are going to find out. But to your point, I think it's pretty remarkable and amazing if this guy's able to get 3 winder shots off in rapid succession. Because just think about that. Okay. Roll in the first one, get a tone, Fox 2. Okay. Missile in the air. You don't have to wait for it to hit, but then you go to the other guy, get a tone, Fox 2, third time Fox 2. That's probably 10 seconds at the quickest. At the quickest, right? And so, am I spiked? Are the Strike Eagles already defensed? They raw gear off, radars off. Are they just like Wizzos, arms on the canopy rails kind of thing?
I'm going to make an assumption, right? Like, you had this elevated stress doing whatever operation they were just out doing. And then maybe, again, they came back, they're diverting, they're handling it right. But while there's still a threat in Kuwait, I'm probably thinking ballistic missiles and Shahed drones. I'm not worried about an Iranian fighter that just snuck up on my 6 o'clock, because everyone and their brother would be screaming about it. They're not going to get there undetected. So I could picture that your heightened awareness is, for at least an air-to-air threat, is lower. You're RTB, you're getting ready to land. So the fact that this guy got 3 shots off, I guess, is impressive. this would be a very quick succession of, if he's using AIM-9s, lock, shoot, lock, shoot, lock, shoot. I don't know if the Kuwaitis have JHIMICs or a helmet-mounted queuing system. You might know.
I don't know.
That would make it easier to queue IR-guided missiles like an AIM-9 in rapid succession. Otherwise, it would be a little bit more mech intensive, I would imagine, to still target all three of these jets.
And we don't know what model of winder they have. They don't have X's. They have Mikes. They have Limas. We don't know. I don't think they have JHIMICs, because none of the stock photos I've seen, they're all wearing HU-55s. Nobody's got a JHIMICs helmet on. So,
and that would make sense. And I think that is like, if you've seen it, like that would be my assumption. And I think that's a fair assumption. But I just go like from my F-16 days, right? The F-16 has gone through an AESA radar upgrade. I was flying with an APG-68, a Mexican radar, which was capable of dual target tracks. So if we're talking about radar guided missiles, I mean, that was part of your deal, is targeting to and shooting to on a lot of your air-to-air things. But you were working to do that. So now this guy he's shot 3, granted, maybe IR guided missiles, maybe a combination of both. I mean, yeah,
I would just note the Tomcat could track 24 and shoot 6 if we were carrying 6 Phoenix. And they didn't maneuver once we went up away. But,
right.
So this war is already full of some ironies and coincidences. As we've already said, we're using Shahed drone technology, improved back at them. Here's another example here. I mentioned yesterday those Su-24s that were shot down by the Qatari Eagles. So it turns out that those Su-24s began life with the Iraqi Air Force, and they, went into exile. They fled the country during Desert Storm to Iran. The Iranians never gave them back and made them into Iranian Air Force assets, and now they've been shot down by the Qataris. So there's a little bit of poetic irony in this war. A couple other things that are happening. So there are reports that Arleigh Burke destroyers are using a system called Helios, which is basically laser guided or laser directed energy weapons to take down drones. And a guy we were quoting a couple of live streams ago, Shanaka Pereira, tweeted that several sources have reported Helios is being used against the drones during this war. And also our friends at Proceedings confirmed that the Navy had used Helios to take out drones in a live test some months ago. And Shanaka points out why this matters. And it's the cost-effective piece, as we've talked about. If you use a $2.5 million SM-6 to take down a $30,000 drone, or a $1.5 million Sidewinder to do the same thing, it starts to not work on the ledger. So what Shanaka does math-wise, every Patriot interceptor costs $3 to $4 million per missile. Every THAAD interceptor costs $10 million. The UAE, for instance, has intercepted more than 755 drones and 172 ballistic missiles in this war alone. So, do the math. You're looking at several $1 billion in under a week. Helios runs on electricity. The marginal cost of firing the laser is essentially zero. So it's $0 against $30,000 now. So that changes everything. And it also upsets the apple cart in terms of the Iranian strategy to deplete the enemy's resources, right? So that's an interesting thing. And so the other thing that's happening is the Israelis have opened a front in their war against Hezbollah, pushing them north to the settlers to the north. They had to move out. Now they don't want that to happen again. So they're using laser guided or laser directed energy to take out their rockets and their missiles right after they come off the rail. So if you look at this, you can see they barely get off the rail and they're taken out. So directed energy weapons are being used in this war is the point. And here's some more sort of B-roll from Lincoln. See the winder on the rail there? That's CAG 9. That's a cool Cat 2, Cat 3. That's why we do clearing turns. As you guys remember, the Lincoln has F-35Cs. So there you go. So that's CAG 9 in action. Good stuff.
Ward, real quick, one quick thing on the
Yeah.
Helios laser, which I think is a really important thing to note. That laser, I mean, you're talking about a power range between 60 to 120 kilowatts of power. A Burke can produce just under 80. And so one of the things that you're doing is really at the max power capacity of that Burke. You have to basically take her offline. If you notice the picture, ship wasn't moving. You literally have to be almost a standing target to use that Helios laser. It's one of the reasons that there's been arguments for building a large surface combatant for so long, because our Burkes are just, limited in their power outage. You can't get any more power out of them with the gas turbine engines. It's one of the reasons you want a larger, expansive platform to be able to generate up and put more expansive laser weapons on board. I think this is going to be an interesting discussion point after this event. How did these destroyers perform? We saw that a little bit down in the Red Sea when some of the ships were using the lasers down there. Also, depending on where they're at, as well as I do, Strait of Hormuz is not a great place. It's dusty, it's windy, the coverage isn't always the best there, and lasers get degraded there a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So another thing we talked about yesterday in the episode, the first manned aircraft versus manned aircraft kill for the Israeli Air Force F-35 Adir happened. They shot down a Yak 130 with an R-73 capability, which does have helmet-mounted queuing and off-bore sight capability. We didn't have this footage of the HUD. Let me find it here. Yeah, here we go. So here is. Hold on, I got to remove this first. Stand by. So here's the HUD footage of the IF F-35 shooting down that Yak 130 over, basically is in the vicinity of Tehran. So first kill for the Israeli F-35 fleet. The other thing to mention here is, as we said, Iran continues the missile and drone strikes. They're trying to expand the war. They're not going to go mano a mano with the American and Israeli military because they can't. So now they're doing the sort of asymmetric thing of trying to draw other countries in. Particularly, they have attacked Azerbaijan. And so you can see that's up here to the north. And they actually launched drones at Turkey, which is a bold move. And those were taken out. The ones in Azerbaijan actually landed. I have some B-roll of that here. Hold on. So just here's a parking lot. You can see the drone hit. So obviously the Azerbaijanis are not happy about that, have protested that. They are not entering the war yet. The other thing, a rumor was spreading around that the Kurds had marshaled forces on the border. And again, let's look at the map here to get oriented. So the Kurdish region is basically the southern border of Turkey. We've documented Kurdish entanglements with various factions in Syria, including ISIS and the Syrian National Army, both pre and post or during Assad and after Assad. And they also have presence on the border between Iran and Turkey. they have said unconditionally, categorically, they are not putting boots on the ground in Iran. So that is bad intel at the moment. The other thing that was spreading around yesterday was that an F-15 had been shot down in Iran. CENTCOM has dismissed that as not true. So we'll assume that that is in fact the case. Like I said, the EU is reluctantly, let's call it, getting dragged into the conflict. We talked about UK. Keir Starmer is trying at once to accommodate the United States and also not get completely torpedo himself with Parliament. So the step they've made is you can use Cyprus, and immediately Cyprus was targeted by the Iranians after he announced that. The Greeks are not cool with that. So there's some problems there. The French came out yesterday and said, we're in. We're going to send de Gaulle. We're all in. And then shortly thereafter said, we're not in. So I'm sure there was a bit of domestic pushback on this summary announcement, this unilateral announcement by Macron that they were in. So they're not in. President Trump said, and Spain is joining the fight. And Spain immediately said, no, we are not. So it's a moving picture in terms of, is this a coalition? Is NATO/the EU going to assist in any direct way? Currently, the answer is not very much, if at all. And then the last thing to bring up here, this is another one that would fit under the heading of irony, I guess, is, and this is where again I'm saying that President Trump's Truth Social post was probably not productive, because now we're reaching out to the Ukrainians and going, hey man, you guys are doing a great job taking down those Russian drones. Can we leverage some of that technology? And so President Zelensky is being very magnanimous here. You can see the subtitles there. He's speaking in Ukrainian, but basically saying, sure, you guys can have what we know insofar as it doesn't hazard our war effort or steal resources, meaning both equipment and personnel, from us. The other thing to note is the training track and the learning curve for this technology and this employment is lengthy. So, but again, it's pretty rich that now we're going out to the Ukrainians and like, hey man, sorry, we've been ignoring you. But now we need what your hard fought learnings to fight the war in Iran. So, okay, now we're going to enter the free play part of the episode, which is address some comments or questions. While I'm doing that, you guys have any thoughts about things that I discussed or other things that I missed?
I got a question for Rain. How long can, the Air Force and the air component sustain this level? I mean, it seems as if the hours are going to be accumulating here quite a bit without even getting into the ammunition supply and stockpiles at all. I mean, F-22s, long range. We're talking about shuttling planes from a good distance here too, and the tankers. What's your take on it, Rain?
That's a great question. Standard fighter pilot answer is it depends. But nonetheless, this is incredibly taxing. We saw with Operation Midnight Hammer, just from the sheer logistics of like the fuel component alone, the amount of air power that's being thrown up, the amount of sorties being generated, just that aspect, getting fuel to the jets. But again, you look at all these bombs, weapons have to be built. They all have to be loaded. The maintenance that has to be done just to turn these jets on a daily basis is significant. This is a lot of manpower. This is a lot of parts. This is a lot of pieces. So when it comes to how long the Air Force can sustain it, I don't have a great answer. I know there are people that are obviously much smarter than me that are looking at it, but undoubtedly this is incredibly taxing. I think you alluded to the first time we did this, the carrier strike group, the carrier, there's pretty much a known timeline that it can be maintained and sustained operations before it has to take a knee. But I would not be surprised if we see more iron flowing to the region, more bodies flowing to the region, just to enable the maintainers to be able to support these jets, to be able to turn these jets and keep putting back up, assuming the tempo increases or stays about what it's been doing right now, because the United States is putting up a lot of air power when it comes to the Air Force. So that's a great question. This is a lot.
Yeah, well, I know it's a tough one because I think about the crews, and that's a lot. I mean, obviously it's the flight is taxing on the pilots, obviously, but the crews rotating around those aircraft have got to be really tough. The other thing that I was struck by, Ward, when you were talking was, the proliferation of low cost drones. I mean, when you were fighting an enemy, a couple of decades ago, weaponry is costly, it's expensive. And so, you had to defend kind of fixed points because even your enemy couldn't afford to expend weaponry because it's expensive. They don't have that much. It's a limited pool. But light drones, I mean, you got to defend everything now. And that's really, showcasing the difficulty we have here. We saw this early on in the war between Azerbaijan and Armenia, which nobody paid attention to for a long time, but they were really showing that. And then Russia-Ukraine demonstrated it just absolutely, the proliferation. And now we're seeing it on a scale really I don't think we've seen before across the entire Persian Gulf region.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Rain, as you and I talked about or surmised when we're talking about the JPITL, the Joint Prioritized Target List, and the plan that's in the can that we've been building for months and months, it certainly most acutely the 30 days before the COMEX of the war. So our guess is that's a 4-week, sort of fixed target list. And as you suggest, we've done phase 1. Now we're into perhaps let's call it phase 2. The president has sort of teased out that we're ahead of schedule, which may be speaking to the pressure he's already getting about how long, endless wars, this sort of thing. And that is, I'll bring this up, which is the White House tweeted against that criticism that we don't know what we're doing, and everybody's saying one thing or another. Rubio saying one thing, JD Vance is saying something else. The president is saying something else in terms of why we've done this. Secretary Rubio's logic in the halls of Congress the other day about we had to start the war because Israel was going to do it anyway. That was kind of didn't really make any sense logically, and seemed like a stretch. But again, this isn't the first time that we've gone to war under, let's just say, faulty pretenses. I got to know Admiral Stockdale pretty well at the end of his life, and he was very open about how the Vietnam War was started under faulty pretenses, and he wasn't happy about it, yet he served with honor and distinction, including his time as a POW. Infamous start to the war in Iraq in terms of WMD. So, faulty pretenses in terms of imminent threat, that's not, there are historical precedents for that situation. But we're at war now, and what we're covering here is the execution of war. That's kind of what we do here, and not really get into the politics, because a lot of people are asking me, what do I think about the war? I think that it's very lucky we have super talented war fighters out there currently across the services, eye-wateringly so. And to your point, Sal, about the Navy resources, Ford is giving their all and then some. As we talk about what else do we got, Rain, on the carrier side, currently the answer is nothing. I mean, the next ship that could roll in is Bush, CVN-77, just finished what we call Comp 2X, is doing their, pier side last bit of stuff. So they can be in theater in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month. So until that time, you got Ford out there. But the chairman also hinted that we have more stuff coming into theater. And I've seen Flight Aware and other things about more F-22s have flown into theater and other sorts of stuff. So I don't know if I agree with the president's sentiment that we got forever and we can do it forever. I think that's a little bit reckless to use those terms. But certainly we have a bench. I don't know if I'd call it a deep bench, but we certainly have to be mindful about the op tempo of the folks who are already in theater. That's part A. But just to point out here, in addition to running this B-roll that they put on this tweet, these are the epic fury priorities: destroy the Iranian regime's missiles, annihilate their navy, ensure their terrorist proxies can't destabilize the world, and ensure Iran can never obtain a nuclear weapon. So of that to-do list, I'm saying number 2 is done. Check it off. The other 3, to varying degrees, and I showed you the underground whatnots in terms of the missile launchers, and obviously they're still reaching out and touching all the Arab nations and trying to drag new ones in. So that's going to be an ongoing challenge. The terrorist proxies, that's an asymmetric threat that you cut off the head, and it's like the sorcerer's apprentice. You make 2, you make 16, you make 48, right? So that's the other criticism I've heard about this strategy of, okay, we took out the leadership, we got the Ayatollah, we got the head of the Republican Guard, we got 40 of their leadership. New guy fleets up, he's got a crosshairs on his back already. That's not how the country is wired. And it reminds me a lot of what Antonio, our good friend Antonio, was saying about Venezuela. It's the org chart is not as segmented as top to bottom as the Occidental world. Each little tribe, each little region has their own sort of things, and they do not recognize, nor does the leadership in Tehran exercise direct control over that part of the country. So in some ways, these people are blissfully naive of what happens in Tehran. It's the same thing I saw in Afghanistan. The guys in Paktika province, the shepherds, had no idea what was going on in Kabul, and they didn't care. And so when you're petitioning them some sort of freedom and voting, and they're like, I don't speak Mandarin Chinese, right? Yep. So that's something we have to be mindful of as we go forward here. So from a strict military execution sense, the plan is in fact going really well. That's inarguable. And the fact we can shift between exquisite standoff to precision guided is evidence of that. The fact we have B-52s in the mix and B-1s in the mix is evidence of that. Those are not stealth airplanes. And the other thing to discuss is the boots on the ground piece, because, yesterday Secretary Haig says, somebody asked him, and oh, by the way, I'll note we had real journalists in the room yesterday. They don't have offices in the Pentagon anymore, but it wasn't just the zealots of the podcasters among the folks in the chair. So some great questions were asked, including, how long is this going to last? And other things around those. And so the secretary answered as matter-of-factly as he could, again, with a little bit of an edge to it. We'll see how long this can go on. And as we were discussing, or I was discussing with Julie Mason on XM Radio a couple of days ago, that laundry list that I just put up, let me put it back up here. So what this is ill-defined, right? So if you look at, for instance, the ham-fisted analogy I'm going to use about what's our Finex here is ISIS presence in Minneapolis, right? So you can declare mission accomplished on all of these bullets and then go to the Iranian people, hey, you guys, we gave you the space to seize the day. Good luck. Hey, Israel, we're not a partner anymore in this. You guys do what you got to do, but we're out in terms of hostilities. So depending on the prevailing winds and the other variables that President Trump responds to, and again, I ask you to look at what happened in Minneapolis with ISIS direct presence there. So if it starts to go poorly here, from any one of those variables we're talking about, then you can, with this as your template, go 1, 2, 3, 4 checked off. There you go. We're out. Right. What are your thoughts around that sort of thing?
I was going to say, the objectives you have up on there, like those are strategic level military objectives, in my opinion. And I think what we're all looking for is what is the number 5, which would be, and again, to make an assumption, we all want a stable Iran that is not threatening in the region nor threatening to the United States. How do you get to that piece? Much more complicated, as you've alluded to. And again, like these 4, we're moving down the list. But when that list is concluded, or when the winds shift and it's time to take a step back, Iran now has a lot of problems when it comes to stability, right? It will be destabilized unless there is some force that rises up, is injected, and control it. And again, I think, we've seen this play out before, and it hasn't worked out well. So how do we get to a stable, non-threatening nation? And that's a bigger one to bite off.
Yeah, I would add on what Rain said there. The other aspect about this that is really unique and different than what we did in Afghanistan or in Iraq, for example, is that Iran is shutting down global commerce, which is a massive issue here. I mean, when you invade Afghanistan, there's no economic impact largely globally. Even when we invaded Iraq, it didn't have it. This is different. This is 20% of global oil, 20% of liquefied natural gas is not coming out. This means that there's got to be more than just the military aspect here. It's got to be political. There's got to be economic. You're going to have China screaming about this, Japan, Korea, allies. This makes it a much different conflict. And one of the things we saw, that even if you eliminate the Iranian Navy, what we've seen with the Houthi in the Red Sea and the Ukrainians in the Black Seas, you don't need Navy to really impact shipping at all, especially commercial shipping. And my fear is Admiral Cooper gave a great briefing and very much on the forefront of what's going on militarily, but there's an economic aspect here and a political aspect that we need to be thinking about too. And that is not on the shoulders of those who are out there with the U.S. uniform on right now. That's got to be back in Washington, and it's got to be them making that decision, because there's going to be outward pressure. Yes, people tend to get upset when the U.S. uses military force in the past, and we've seen that. There's economics tied to this, and that's going to be an even bigger driver.
Good point. So, Sal, I know you got places to be, and I'll note that Rain is joining us from Seoul, South Korea. So that's why he doesn't have his usual cool guy backdrop happening. But
he doesn't need a cool guy backdrop. He's a cool guy.
No,
he's Navy. He doesn't need that.
No doubt. But how cool is that he's joining us from? What time is it over there, Rain?
3:07 a.m.
Wow,
oh man,
hardcore, bro.
Yeah,
well,
just for you guys.
Thank you for the effort. Yeah, we appreciate it. So, and oh, by the way, keep your phones on, boys. As I said before, we're going to convene the Wonder Triplets from time to time in this format. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. A great crowd, great comments, very productive. I will put the links on where to subscribe to both the Afterburn podcast and what's going on with shipping in the episode description. So keep these guys in your scan, because in between us doing these, there's some hyper focus on the subtopics therein that you don't want to miss. So guys, thank you for the time today.
Thanks, Ward.
Appreciate it.
All right. As soon as I hang up here, this will become an episode of the channel. So check it out. Come back and see your comments or see what the discussion was. Again, thank you, everybody, for showing up here on a weekday. What day is it? I don't want to get that wrong. It's Thursday, right? So again, if you're not a subscriber, become one so you don't miss heads up about no notice live streams and other things going on. This is a really chaotic environment. We're going to try to cover it for you, unbiased and factual and comprehensive as we go along here. So thanks for those who already are subscribers, and look forward to the rest of you becoming subscribers before very long. And as I always say, in the meantime, I look forward to talking to you again very soon. Thanks again for being here.